And we are live. Welcome to the first iOS Lead Essentials podcast, the place to start your journey towards a remarkable iOS career. I'm Mike.
And I'm Kayo.
And in every episode, we'll go deep into an essential iOS dev topic. So the topic for this first episode is testing.
Very popular topic.
Yes, to say the least. And more specifically, the pains of writing automated tests. So we've been getting many questions from our students and the iOS community in general, and we decided to address most of them in one go.
And we'll be addressing the questions with the premise that you want a remarkable career. The questions come from people that they want to test, they want to do a great job, they want to do the best they can.
Exactly. That's a big disclaimer there, because what we're going to suggest, it doesn't mean it's applicable in all cases. It means for a very particular scenario where you want a career transformation, you want to achieve growth, you want to evolve, right? These are the things that we think you should be thinking of doing.
Exactly.
Okay, so first question.
What are some good reasons not to test? You can see that that's normally what we get from beginners, right? Like finding reasons not to do the work.
Yes.
That's completely normal, right? When you don't know how to do something, you're probably going to avoid it. It's risky.
Absolutely. It's risky. It has a tremendous cost to learn how to do it properly. And yeah, I mean, maybe we should reverse the question and go first. What are the reasons that you should be testing? Why you should be doing it in the first place? And if you understand why, then perhaps it's much easier to reply. Why shouldn't you be doing it? Well.
Okay, so what are the reasons why you should test?
Right, and the reason is in professional software development, I think the reason is to try to decrease the risk is, this uncertainty for the future. The main question is, how do you know what you've built works? Right? That's
right.
and you basically have, a gazillion different states that your system can be in. So what you're doing basically with testing is that you are decreasing the possibilities of the system to find itself in a place where it doesn't work, right? Or you don't know what happens there. So that's why we like testing.
So
because
everyone tests somehow, even if manually, right? Because you write something and you see it happening on the screen. Like, okay, it does what I want.
Absolutely.
But we are talking specifically about automating that work in a way that you're sure that it works now, and you're sure that it works 5 minutes from now, and 5 days from now, and 10 days from now, and years from now.
Exactly.
Right? So it reduces the cost, because if it takes you 10 minutes to do something manually, but it takes you 0.1 second if you automate it, you should probably automate it.
Absolutely.
Because that's the problem. Something might work right now, you tested it, but a change tomorrow or in 5 minutes from now breaks your assumptions. The system does not do what you think anymore.
Exactly. That's why you need to document basically your work and assert that it works for a very specific set of scenarios. And if you have new scenarios, in 5 minutes, you add them in your test suite.
Exactly.
So that's the basic idea. So I think that's one way of putting why you should test. And now let's go back why you shouldn't test.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the good reasons not to test.
I think, and the one reason that comes to mind that you shouldn't be testing is like if you're not dealing with risk, if you're not dealing with uncertainty. So if you're doing something that it's like 100% discardable.
For example,
for a spike, for example, or a prototype, where like this is not gonna see the light of production. This is not gonna be shipped to customers. You're doing something for experimental purposes, and the experiment has an expiration date.
right?
That's
And it's
it.
very short, right?
It's very short.
If the
Exactly.
expiration date is 1 year, would you test it?
That's completely different. I'm talking about minutes here.
Right. Yeah.
Right? You want to, for example, you don't know how an API works, and you want to see it in action. Like you should probably testing that.
Like a playground, right? You just want to
Exactly.
see it working.
Exactly, like a playground. So I think that's a good candidate. Prototypes.
So work that will be discarded soon,
Exactly.
like a
Soon.
prototype
Like a prototype.
or a spike. Okay. What about MVPs?
Right. So, that's
Meaning
the other.
the minimum viable product, right? The first release.
Exactly. So I think there's a great deal of confusion when it comes with MVPs, because they might be perceived as prototypes, or as like projects that have a very short lifespan. Let me remind you something. P stands for product in MVP, right? It doesn't stand for prototype, minimum viable prototype. That means that your customers are gonna interact with your system there, with a deliverable, and that's scary. That can cost money to the business, or make, if it's good what you're doing. So I think MVPs are like real applications, real products, and you should be definitely see them in this way. Thus, testing should be the priority. Should be like a very integral process in creating these apps and delivering them to your customers.
Right. Because the idea with MVPs, when people say, let's not test MVP, it's because we are going to release it to the customers, and they think it's a prototype because we're just testing an idea, right? The problem is, and you want this problem, if it is successful, you have to maintain that. So you you want your product to be successful, and you say, if it is successful, we're going to test, we're going to rebuild it. What are the odds you're going to have the time? No, you want to add more features, you want to deliver more value to the customers.
Absolutely.
So you better test it from day one.
Yeah, absolutely. And prototypes have their place there as well. Obviously, that should be probably the first thing you build. Once you have validated a couple assumptions, then you should move to the MVP stage, which again, you make a real product there.
Right.
Yeah.
So you don't promote your prototype to a product. If you're planning to write a prototype, and if it's successful, it's going to become the product, you should test it.
100%. Yes.
Got it.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Any other good reason not to test, so we can move on?
I don't see any other reason, personally.
Well, what if you don't know how to test?
Well, if that's the case, then you should learn how to test. Again, if you're aiming for a fulfilling career, if you're aiming for evolution, then as an iOS developer, then you should definitely learn how to do that.
But it could be a good reason not to test. If you have a very tight deadline and you don't know how to do it, it's going to be risky, right? It can backfire. By adding tests, you can compromise the delivery.
Yes, that's definitely the case many times. And understanding, how to juggle basically the needs of the team, the needs of the business, the needs of the product you're making. These are hard things to get right.
Yeah.
But like I don't think compromising testing should be the first step. Like if that's the case, then you should you should just
Learn the skill.
yeah,
Get some
probably.
training. Maybe if your business doesn't want to invest in you, you have to invest it from your own pocket. But it's your future. It's your career.
Exactly. Absolutely.
So don't compromise the project, but learn how to test.
Okay.
Next question. What should I not test? Which is similar to the first one,
Right.
but it's like, okay, I'm sold. I'm going to test the things that need to be tested. But what should not be tested?
That's a good question, because like, yeah, sometimes we hear like another common way of saying that is, what should my code coverage be, for example?
Right.
And you say, I don't know, 8%, 90%. How do these numbers like come by? Like how I don't know. Personally, I think the only logical thing is to do 100% of testing there. Again, we stated previously the reasons why you shouldn't be doing that. If there's if you don't assume any risk in what you're doing, and if there is like a very short lifespan for your project, then yeah. But I don't know. Otherwise, like, what's your opinion there?
So I should not test things that are 100% reliable.
Right.
That have been, and reliable means they have been tested already by someone else.
Okay.
Right? So if I'm using URL session, for example, I'm not going to test the URL session works. If I found out at some point the URL session doesn't work, I'm going to find another framework to use.
So you're saying that you take some things for granted. For example, Apple's code, you take it for granted, but the integration with your own system, then you want that to make sure it works as expected.
Yes, I trust that URL session works, but I'm going to write tests that I'm using URL session correctly, and that it generates the output I expect. Not that the framework works, but that the output of using it is exactly what I expect.
Absolutely.
And
okay.
So reliable things that have been tested already by someone else or for other means. But the problem is, like, what is 100% reliable in software? Probably nothing. So that's the risk of thinking, well, I'm not going to test this because I know it works. What if you make an assumption about core data, for example, that core data is going to store things in a correct order, and then you find out that no, there's no order. When you fetch your data, there's no order.
Yes.
Right? So that's why you need to test it. You may have wrong assumptions, or core data can have bugs as well.
Exactly.
Even though it's a project that has been tested, that's been around for 20 years, it has bugs.
Exactly. About the reliability, I have a comment there. Sometimes this reliability is established based on something that will never change.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So it's stability.
Right, exactly. It's stable because it never changes, and we have established, like a version that works, so we're good. And that's, in my opinion, that's a fallacy. You just can't predict if something is going to change or not.
Yes.
So even if that's the case, if something doesn't change, like you tested once, if it didn't change, if it never changes, then I don't know, it's done. I think these are like the easy, the cheap, if you like, cases where you do it once, it's done. You never have to go on the production side and change that. So yeah, and the problem there is when, let's say, an authoritative figure like your manager, like your boss, is going to come to you and is going to say, we don't need to test that because it's never going to change. Well,
right.
Okay, it's your opinion. It's not a fact. And we see many developers being conflicted with this. I mean, this is no joke because it can cause a great deal of stress. So, yeah, that's
But this is already a symptom that you are testing after, because it means, oh, it works, so don't test it.
exactly.
So testing not even part of the development process. It's a thing done after the fact. And so your boss says, well, it works. Why would you test it? It's being tested. Like, yeah, you can see it works. Look, it works.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's another symptom. If your manager is telling you what your practices should be, you are the specialist, right?
Exactly.
Or you should be. If you're hired just to type code as you're being told, you're probably not going to have a remarkable career. You have no autonomy.
Yeah.
Or trust. So maybe if that's your problem, you need to build trust, not stop testing.
Absolutely. That's there's a cap there for sure that you're going to reach if you're not going to go out of the way and like provide your own insights, not based on suggestions from the management side or the business side, but it's your own insights because you understand how volatile technology is and how fragile systems are. So you need to go out of your way and not use it as an excuse that the fact that something has a very low probability of changing. Well, very low probability is not zero. It's like it could happen, and you don't want to be the guy or the gal that made this judgment call of not testing something. But that's not the point here is not taking it personally and saying I don't want to be this person. Is like in the first place you don't want your customers to ever experience something that is suboptimal, that is not expected. So yeah.
So what I get from what you said is that not every test you write is going to pay off. You're going to write tests for things that will never change. And you're going to write tests for things you thought it would not change, and they change all the time. So the problem is that, yes, you don't want to write tests for things that don't change. The problem is that you don't know what those things are. So you better test everything.
Absolutely. Exactly. And again, if you see it from a risk management point of view, then the truth is like you never know what's going to happen. So you just want to decrease the probability of bad things happening, to everyone, not just, the code base, because the code base, like what happens in the code base, it reflects to your career, it reflects to the customers, it reflects to the business. So it's, you just want to contain the chaos that can exist.
So maybe your boss comes to you and says, don't test this. So he's micromanaging you. He's telling you exactly what you should do from his point of view, which is managing time at that point, right?
Yeah.
And then you say, okay, but if something goes bad on a Saturday, who's going to go to the office fix it? Probably you.
Yep.
Right? So this is a good incentive for you to fight for your rights there, but not actually fight. The best way to change this, to influence change, is to actually win trust, right? If you consistently deliver good results, your boss is just going to trust you next time and say, oh, you can deliver on time and still test it, and we have no regressions. So if you build this trust over time, you're not going to be micromanaged.
Absolutely. Absolutely, yes.
And how much time are you actually saving by not testing?
That's a good question.
Can you measure that? Do you have a clock actually measuring it and you are comparing?
That's the problem there, because like we hear many times the argument, oh, you're over testing this, or you're over engineering something. Well, can you measure that? What does that even mean in the first place? You're over testing something. There is like, I think there's a trade-off there somehow. Like, yeah, I mean, understanding what you should be testing for example, as you said, now if you're testing your own system, if you're testing the integration of your system with a third-party framework, I think that's like the correct way to go. But if you're then going, you say, no, I don't trust Apple's URL session. I don't trust, something that you should be taking for granted most probably, and
Right.
catching problems in a different way. Then yeah, like that's probably something towards the side of a liability instead of helping you out.
So that's important because you mentioned that if you find a bug with URL session, I said, yeah, you should probably find a new framework. But sometimes you don't have this option, right? Your business bought a framework and say you have to use it.
Yeah.
And let's say you start finding bugs. Then you better write tests for other people's code.
Yes.
Even it's probably going to be like black box tests, right? You're going to just see input, output, and make assumptions on how this thing works. But yeah, you better do it for your own sake.
Absolutely.
For your own sanity.
Absolutely. And that's the other thing that you say, yes, for third-party frameworks, if you start seeing problems there, you should change your strategy, because you understand that there's uncertainty going on here for the future. There's risk going on. I was not expecting a certain behavior. For example, like I bought a framework. I expected this framework to work as it should. It doesn't. Well, am I going to just justify that? Well, what can I do? It doesn't work. No, like you should prepare your system for unexpected behaviors. And yeah, that's testing is a fantastic way of doing so. Catching it early, getting the feedback soon.
Right. And just like with any goods, right? If you buy a car and it's not doing its job, it doesn't work in the morning, and you cannot get to work on time, you're gonna fight for your rights, right? You're gonna go and find a better car, or ask for a new one, or try to fix it, right? Not just gonna complain and say, well, it is what it is.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
So should I test a simple project? Right, I'm working a very simple project, couple of screens, not much going on. Should I test it?
Yes, go for it, big time. Because that's the best time to test stuff, especially if you're, in this junior level that you are getting your feet wet with test-driven development, automated testing. I think that's definitely the best time to do so, because you don't have complexity most probably. Like you have a couple screens, you just need to do the basics, and yeah, like that's how you learn, right?
That's how you practice.
Yeah,
that's how you learn. Yes,
exactly.
So do it when it's easy.
Absolutely.
So you get better at it, and you can get higher, bigger challenges. How else will you learn?
Exactly. Like, because one thing is for sure, you will not be able to do it when things are hard, So do it when it's easy. Repeat a lot, things start clicking, then you can continue and do it in more complex situations.
So if you need to learn how to ride a bike, it's better to learn when you have like a playing field with someone helping you and guiding you, and things are easy, low risk. You don't want to learn when there's a cheetah running after you, and that's your only way to survive.
Yeah, probably not. No, no cheetah. Just
do it when it's easy.
Do it when it's
easy. So when the
easy.
problems get harder, you can follow, you can apply it.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Next question. Should I test a core data implementation?
Okay, we covered this quite a bit. Yeah, definitely. Go for it.
If you're writing code, yes, test it.
Exactly.
But again, don't test core data, right?
Yes.
You're going to test that the input and output of using core data in the middle does what you expect.
Exactly. Because, it can be buggy.
Or you
Why not?
may not know how to use the framework correctly.
Exactly. So you should document your hypothesis. Like, what do you expect your code to do? Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fantastic. Like, I'm a very big believer in this thing, because you have assumptions, you eliminate the assumptions basically. I like
Right.
that.
Next, should I test my view layer? So should I test my UI?
Okay.
Do you
Why
have
not?
code in your UI?
Exactly. Like,
Oh, but it's silly code. So you have 0 bugs in your UI.
right.
How many
Exactly.
UIs are buggy?
Yeah.
I mean, every day I interact with apps, the UI is super, super buggy. And they
Of
keep releasing
course.
updates. They cannot fix it.
Yes. Now, I mean, the UI is probably, as an infrastructure implementation, it's kind of a special thing. For example, we're talking about, especially for automated tests, right? For unit tests, isolated tests, I mean, testing the behavior, right? But then what happens, for example, if you want to test the colors, you have like a label and it has a green color, or you have constraints on your views.
So layout,
Layout,
right?
exactly. So what do you do there?
Animations, right? How can you unit test an animation?
Right. And should you unit test an animation? That's another thing, right?
Maybe.
Absolutely. Like, if again, it depends how valuable this thing is. Like, how much risk does this thing introduce in the rest of the system?
If you're just fading a button, should you unit test that you're fading the button? No, you should unit test that the button is not there after a certain action, or that it is there after a certain action, but the actual animation, maybe it's not that valuable to test that you've been degrading the alpha channel in a certain rate.
Exactly.
You can, but how much value does they have? I don't know. Depends on your use case. How important is that animation for the use case?
I agree 100%. There is no rule, that applies to all scenarios. You should be thinking about, your situation, tailor solutions to your situations, for sure.
So you said about colors. Some colors sometimes, like it's important that you test it. Like if something is
Yes.
wrong, I want it to have a red color. You should probably test the color in there,
Exactly.
right? Because it's kind of driven by some kind of logic. And if you show the wrong question with the green color, you're going to confuse your users. Like that's a pretty important element of your user interface, right?
Exactly.
And a certain behavior that you want to assert, it's always correct.
Right. So what are some ways to do that? Because I feel that, for example, if you're going to go in your unit tests and assert, this label has this color, and should be equal to a specific color, and you create a color there, I think that's like very cumbersome. It can, especially because it can change a lot, or not, I don't know.
So the actual alpha color may change, the combination actually
Exactly.
of RGB. They
Yeah.
may change, or you may change the exact green, but it's still green, right? So we are
Yes.
not testing exactly the RGB combination, right? We are testing that we have a correct answer color. You could create a constant that means correct answer color and
There you
wrong
go.
answer color, for example, and you assert that you have that. So if you change the constant, it's still fine. But you can say, but what if I change the constant wrong?
Right.
If I change the alpha, the RGB combination, and now it's orange somehow.
Yes. Yes.
Your unit test is not going to get that.
Exactly.
What do you do then?
Yeah. So for this kind of scenario, you probably need some sort of diff between, like a screenshot testing, for example, that you can diff the changes based on your expected and what you have. in your system. So yeah, I think that's very, very interesting what you're saying there. So you're saying that the behavior is one thing, and then the values are another thing. So the behavior is, yes, this is like the correct color or the wrong color or whatever. You need to assert that to make sure that the system behaves in a certain way, but then what kind of color is that? Yeah, that belongs somewhere else.
Yes, the visuals belong someone else, where you can actually visualize it.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
Probably a screenshot.
Yes.
But you can automate that, capture, and even automate in a way that every time there's a difference, as you say, a diff of these two images, you're going to be alerted, and now you have to go there and look at it and say, no, actually it's okay, or no, that's wrong now. Right?
Exactly.
But you need someone to look at it and actually say if it's still fine or not, because it's visual. You need to visualize it.
100%. I agree. Very nice. Very, very good. Okay.
By the way, those tests can be very fast if you just render it on the screen and take a screenshot. You don't need to actually run the simulator, press buttons, and see it.
Yes.
You just render a portion of the screen, take a snapshot, and that's it. Should I test network requests?
Okay. Well, not to become boring here, but yes, you should. Well,
I think the question is if you should or not, is how
exactly.
you should test it then.
Exactly. That's what I want to say. What exactly are you trying to test there? Again, like, are you going to test the URL session thing? No, like, you shouldn't be doing that. Are you going to test, for example, are you going to assert that you're creating the correct URL requests? You know, like you have some sort of a builder factory of URL requests, and you know, you want to assert that it has a post body, for example, it gets XYZ data or XYZ parameters, then yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
So you are testing that you conform to your API contract, which requires a specific request, you have a specific path, a specific method, and etc.
Exactly. That's it. And then how does this request integrate with I don't know, like your use cases, you know, with your services, and are we talking about like unit testing here? Are we talking about integration testing? You know, end-to-end tests? I think you should definitely prepare your project for something like that. Like, you know, hit the network probably in a different target as well. You know, so
you need to layer your strategy for testing.
Exactly.
You should probably have the most majority of tests as the unit level.
Exactly.
Very to the point, like, am I creating the right request? Do I have the right body there? Can it be rendered like in JSON form? Can I decode and encode these? If I get a response back, can I decode it? Right? So all based, like everything that's contract based, that you go to the API or you have a documentation and you have like all the possible payloads, all the possible parameters, all the possible paths, you can unit test that because that's a contract. That's a contract test. But maybe you follow all the contract, but when you run it, it doesn't work because the documentation you were following was wrong. The contract changed. So that's the point where you should probably have some integration tests end-to-end that go fetch the data, log in with a user, and do all the things you expect. Just because sometimes you're just dealing with APIs you have no control or you don't trust. It's a third party that you have not even customer support because it's a free service.
Classic.
Or sometimes it's even working within a team that is just moving super fast and they keep breaking the contract all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
And how many times I wrote those kind of tests and I found bugs in the API and I helped the API team improve the software, right? So why not? It doesn't take that long.
No, for sure it doesn't. And I think that's an excellent strategy. As you said, the base should be the behavior, should be the contract, and then you should have like a smaller layer testing the interaction now. with the client and server or what have you there. So yeah, the question is, should I test network requests? For sure,
Of course.
with many strategies as well.
All right, that's enough. Next. Should I test if there is a QA department where I work?
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Big time. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's not their responsibility to
No.
test your code. You are responsible to make sure that your code works. And that works now, works tomorrow, works forever.
I think that's very important what you're saying, because you said they're not responsible for testing your code, right? Like
Right.
that's very distinct and very important in my opinion, because QA is usually is testing the product as a product. It doesn't
Yes.
test the code, right?
And they are helping drive the requirements with the customers as well. Right? They
Exactly.
talk with customers, they write acceptance tests, they write the requirements, they do business analysis. They are guaranteeing the whole quality of the product, not of your
Right.
code.
Yeah, exactly. And all these things tend to be in integration, right? So you have 2-3 parts of the whole system that they're gonna make sure they should work together. But for the isolated part, for your code, your component, that's all you. You should definitely not rely on them. Maybe they don't even have access to like these types of
Yeah. Sometimes a different team in a different office, they don't have access to the code, to Git, to your source control, nothing. Right? They test it like a black box, right? They
Exactly.
just try to find issues in there.
Exactly.
Right? And they make sure that actually the product does what the business wants, what the customers wants.
Yes.
Which is completely different that if your class does what you want and the whole integration with the backend works, that's on you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you delegate testing to QA, they're going to have to do so much more work than they're already responsible for. They'll become a bottleneck.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And they're going to hate you.
Exactly. So, yeah, I think that's a bad idea. It's a bad idea again because it creates this very unnecessary dependency. We assume here that you take ownership and you're responsible for your work. So this testing again is on your court. You are responsible for that. Not other people are responsible for that. So I don't think it's a good way to think like that. Delegating testing to another person, to another team. Doesn't matter if their name is QA. That's just make sure everything works from your end first. And if they find something, they're gonna notify you. And I think that's much better for the whole operation to exist in peace.
Right. So your goal should be for QA to find no bugs.
Yeah, that's incentive. You should have never.
Should be proud and say, "Come on, use it. It's perfect."
Exactly.
That's the kind of confidence you should have.
The other thing we should mention is the question is if there is a QA department, should I test? Now, what if there is no QA department in your team, right? And basically you are the QA department.
Yeah.
Right? So personally, I really like that. It kind of forces you to be extra responsible, if you like. Again, not if there is a QA department, you shouldn't be responsible. You should be very, very, very responsible. But there's this sense of ownership of, the stakes are higher, basically.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. The blame is going to be assigned to you and only you if something goes bad. So yeah, I mean, but again, that's how you have skin in the game, and you become in this at this elite level, expert level in as a professional. I mean,
right. So it's nice to have QA because it kind of alleviates a little bit responsibilities. But I've worked with teams with no QA, and it was very nice. And you could see more ownership of the product from the developers. So every time there was a meeting about like the requirements, like everyone would go there because like if there's any decision made in that room when I'm not there, it's gonna fall on me, right? So you take much more responsibility and ownership. But sometimes that can become a bottleneck, right? So you need a QA department to help you.
Yeah.
But it should work in unison, like it should be together. It's not like QA is gonna test after we are done. No, they are part of the process. They work with you. It's one team.
Yeah, and that's hard to achieve, but
it is.
Yeah, that's how it should be.
Next, okay. Should I test if I don't have time to test?
Right. Okay. Well, yes. Again, the answer is yes. You should.
Why don't you have time? Like
that? Yeah, that's a good question. Like, what does that even mean if I don't have time to test? Because
do you have time to deliver your feature without tests?
Exactly. That's, my favorite part is if you're writing the test first, then that's not even a thing, like you can't ask the question if you're starting to code, a feature with the test first.
Right.
Because you can't have a feature done without your tests. So yeah.
So the reason is like, why don't you have time? Because you're rushing too much? Maybe you should slow down. Is it because you don't have the skills to test? You should learn the skills and practice, right? Find some answers, get some training, talk to your boss and say, hey, you know what? We would be much more productive if we had this training that we found here. It can really help us. And if your boss says no, like you might have to go out of your way and do it. But you're investing in yourself. So the next job you get, you're going to be more valuable. You're going to probably find people that care more, that have higher standards. And that's how you progress in the long term.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So if you don't have time, plan better next time.
Yeah. No, that should never be an excuse for, again, if you want professional fulfillment, if you want to,
deliver your best work every day.
Yeah, exactly. Work in this next level. Yeah. Okay, next question.
Should I test code challenges when applying for jobs?
Yes, absolutely. Even if they say we don't want tests or whatever, like if they say that we don't want tests, that's great because you can discard that. You can go to the next the next application.
Just dodge a bullet.
Yeah, but I think businesses don't have to say that. Like I think they should take it for granted. Like if they want like good candidates, then absolutely they don't have to say it. Like you get extra points if you have unit tests.
Right, a bonus, right? Bonus test. Yeah.
No.
I wouldn't say bonus anything because I just want to see like what kind of like care this person is gonna put into this code challenge. How much effort they're gonna put on it. Maybe they don't have time to do it, and that's fine. But you don't need time to show care, right? I would prefer that if they just have like implemented less features in the code challenge, but with more care.
Absolutely.
Than implementing everything super messy, lousy.
Yes, and of course this differs from business to business.
Yes,
but I think these code challenges are an excellent way to showcase how you work in every in day-to-day basis. And well, if you're writing your tests first, that should reflect. That's like probably the best the best possible way to demonstrate how you work, because how many times you have a phone interview with someone, recruiter or a software developer or whatever, and they say, what's your take on tests? And say, oh yeah, I like tests, and then well,
so it's a two-way filter, right? The company, you're gonna filter people that not up to their standards, And also the candidate is filtering companies that is not up to their standards.
Absolutely.
Right? Because if you care about testing, if you care about the long term, if you care about like a remarkable career, and you're going after it and you want to work with people with high standards so you can push yourself and grow with time, you better filter those companies as well.
Yes.
Right? If you have the means to wait a little bit longer to find a better company, even sometimes to make less money,
Yes.
but in the long term make more. Right?
Yes.
It's an investment in high standards, in discipline, in good skills, valuable skills. So you need to filter that by being yourself in the code challenge. Don't do this just because the company wants you to do that. Don't test. It's a high indication that they're not going to test, they're going to have low standards, right? It's indication, doesn't mean they will. They might be building amazing software. And even if they ask for tests, doesn't mean they're doing it.
Yes,
that's very, very common.
Absolutely. Very important as well. So yeah, if you want to be in an environment, that have good practices, definitely filter first. That's the take. Filter first.
Next, should I test open source projects? So free open source projects.
Right. So this is where the risk for me goes, like a level insanity, because like many of the open source projects, like the famous ones, they don't test at all. They do manual testing.
They crowdsource the test because there's so many people using it.
Exactly. They crowdsource the test. The testing strategy is crowdsourcing, and then basically you see like a very big list of issues, on the GitHub page.
And lousy fixes that introducing more bugs.
Yeah. So I'm not a big fan of that. So I think you should definitely go after these libraries and test them again with your integration. In integration with your own system. I think, yeah.
What if you are creating these open source projects?
Right.
Should you test it? It's free. Should you go the extra mile to test it?
Again, you don't have to think about these things when you start with a test,
Yes.
Right. So if you going the extra mile means test last, test after. I don't like that. Or you see some projects, for example, that they invite people to add tests.
Yes.
That's.
They have the to-do list. Everything is done. We want to add these few features and add tests.
Yeah.
I wouldn't use the library.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan.
Let's go
either.
there.
Yeah. Okay.
So if you're creating an open source projects, just go the extra mile and do it. You're putting yourself out there, your code out there. Show high standards. Show what you stand for, right? So people are gonna notice it. Maybe you're gonna find better jobs. You're gonna find better people to contribute to it, right? You set like your standards. If you're gonna contribute to this project, you have to send PRs with tests.
Exactly. Absolutely.
There you go. So should I test my own pet projects? Yes, of course.
I think we covered that briefly before. Yes.
It's a great way to practice as well.
That's it. It's a great way to practice.
Because a lot of people complain their bosses don't allow them to test. And when they have their pet projects, they don't test as well.
Right.
I don't know.
Well,
consistency is important.
Yeah. And again, like if you're called to do something in the professional environment where the stakes are high and you haven't done that before, well, how are you going to do that? That's why practicing in these pet projects, I think, is like extremely important. Maybe, you know what I'm going to say, it's the most important thing you can do.
Right.
Especially if you are in this junior mid-level, yeah, just go crazy with the pet projects, and just, like, try all these different ways of doing them.
Yeah, that's the time to over-test. That's the time to over-engineer, right?
Yes,
People are afraid of over-engineering. They end up under-engineering everything,
yes,
right?
yes,
Afraid of over-testing, you under-test. Afraid of over-training, you under-train.
yes, exactly. And yeah, I think part of the real work, happens in these pet projects. Like, your skills are being developed in these pet projects. They're not being developed in the workplace most of the time, when, again, for these more junior levels, you can't understand what's going on, right? And it's completely natural not being able to contribute that much. So that's like your training part.
Yes.
If you're like an athlete, that's, you need to train in order to perform in your race, in your fight, whatever you have waiting for you, right? So that's,
Yeah.
yeah,
So if you're a musician, you're probably not gonna try a new technique on the guitar in the stage, right? You're gonna
right,
practice at home when the stakes are low, when you can practice on your own time, no one watching. Or if you have a gig with a million people watching you live, yeah.
absolutely, absolutely, right, yeah,
Okay, so do it when it's easy. So
yeah,
then you build your skills to get bigger challenges. Next, should I test after?
right.
No, you should test first. But
But
if you didn't, yes, test after, of course.
yeah,
But next
exactly,
time,
yeah.
write the test first.
I think that says it all. I don't think we need to elaborate more here.
That's it.
That, that's it. Yep.
Should I test my code 100%?
What's the alternative? Like
So what they say
92%?
is like, should I only test the important parts?
Right.
But what are the important parts?
Exactly. Like,
The parts that need to work. What doesn't need to work? Is there one
yes,
line of code? One line of code that doesn't need to work. It probably shouldn't be there.
exactly. Exactly. Right. I mean, a comment or something.
I see people
Just,
wasting a lot of time in the office, like, should I test this? And they're discussing for 10 minutes if they should test something or not. If they just sit down and write the test, it would take less than 5 minutes.
yeah. Yeah. Um, I think you should, yeah, just be prepared for that and just do the work. And what's the worst case scenario? Like, nothing bad happens. That's the worst case scenario.
Yes,
You know?
you over-tested.
Yes. All right. Just do it. Over test. Yeah. I mean, I think it's much better to have an over tested code base, instead of an under tested code base, So yeah, that says it all again.
All right. I'm just learning how to code. Should I learn how to test?
Okay. So absolutely, that's that's probably the foundation, for understanding other extremely valuable disciplines in software development. So becoming proficient on testing, it's going to help immensely as a professional software developer, I think. And yeah, especially learning how to test first. Again, not to sound like a broken record, but understanding, the process of doing that, it's going to help you design your system better. It's going to help you think about risks and about risk management generally. Excuse me. So yeah, that's my take.
All right.
What do you think?
I learned how to code first, and then I learned how to test. Right? I was already a proficient developer when I learned how to test. Mm-hmm. So I was very resistant to testing,
Yes.
right, in the beginning. It took me some time to actually believe in the process and trust the process and do it.
Yes.
So even after I learned how to test, I was still teaching people to learn how to code first and then how to test, because that's what I followed, that's what I knew, right? And I was most of the time teaching people, they already knew how to code, how to test. And I think the first times I saw someone like really showing successful cases of people learning how to test, like along with learning how to code, was you showing like cases from your mentees, right?
Right.
And I started trying it out, and actually they can learn faster, because like the way you think about writing tests, it kind of guides you to understand more how programming works, right? It was very beneficial for me. It was like, wow, yeah, you can learn how to test and code, and it actually makes sense. It makes sense for the students as well. And they learn from day one a valuable process, right? At some point, you need to learn how to test. It's just a matter of when. So right now, I think the sooner, the better. We're seeing enough cases with our students, mentees, that, yeah, it works and it's great.
Absolutely. Absolutely, yes. And it's not just the programmatic, part of this thing. It's also the business side, which is, for an expert developer is extremely important to understand the business side as well, because you have to talk to the business, you have to negotiate with the business, you have to understand the like what kind of like impact the code base has on the product, and hedge basically, like protect your code base. So I think that's like probably the number one thing. Well, programmatically learning and also the business side, I think that extremely important things to understand. And yes, I think test-driven development helps students, and it makes it easier to grasp,
Right.
because you are focusing on these ultra small chunks of hypotheses, and like you can constrain the risk, but afterwards you can see the big picture. After having like a whole test case, for example, you can now see the big picture. You can think in branches, and like in scenarios, and how many states your system can be in based on when you're testing a single component. All these things are very, very important, because they open your eyes into stuff that you couldn't see before, because
Yes.
you're never going to think, for example, if you're testing something and that it's like the number of states the system can find itself is, let's say, 2 to the power of 3, right? But in your everyday life, you just see just 2 states. Well, you have a bunch of states missing there.
Yes.
That you're not testing, right? So that's very important, because you can protect your code base better. That's
right. I think like the breakdown of tasks is the biggest benefit for beginners, because if you ask them to build an application, an entire application, they're just overwhelmed with everything they have to do. But if you tell them, well, if you get this input, validate it, and if it's valid, you return like a state valid. Oh, we can do that, right? An if statement, blah, 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 and you create this tiny component, test it, and say, okay, and you also want to render a button here. Okay, I can do that. I can just put a button on the screen, and I test that the button is on the screen. And you can say, okay, now you compose these 2 things. Oh, okay, I just created a validation that triggers an event change, and it triggers a UI rendering. And then you start creating these tiny, tiny, tiny components, and you start composing, and suddenly you have a massive, big, complex application built of simple, tiny parts, right?
Yep.
And they are amazed when they see everything working together, say, I cannot believe I built that.
Yeah. Exactly.
Because if you think of the whole complexity in one, you cannot. Like, our brain cannot do that.
Exactly.
But if you learn how to break down problems, anyone can create a massive application by building from tiny, tiny pieces.
Yep.
And testing helps with that a lot.
So that's the way to go, for sure.
Yes. Okay. Next, I just joined a new team with a terrible legacy code base. Should I test a legacy code base I didn't write?
Wow, that's that's bad.
But
It's a
that's
bad
common,
situation to
right?
be
It's
in.
happening
But
every
it's like
day, every
yeah,
day. You join a team, you inherit the whole legacy code base or whatever, it's there. If you're lucky, the people are still there to support you and help you go towards the mess. But sometimes you just inherit a code base and you just have to understand on your own.
yes, exactly.
So, should I test a legacy code base I didn't write?
Right. I mean, again, is it ever going to change? Like, is this like? Let's establish that.
Right.
If it's not going to change, and let's say it's a legacy code base, and the business is allocating capital to start a new code base, for example.
Right.
So this is like a product that it's going to go away, and you don't care about your customer base, to provide support for that because you're going to have like the new version in some time. Probably not. I think you should allocate all your resources and put your efforts in the new thing.
Right.
But again, it's not a universal rule, right? It depends on your case.
So if you're working on an application, legacy, no tests, but it works fine. It
Right.
works, the customers are happy, and you don't want to change it. No, leave it alone.
Yeah,
It's working. Now, if you want to maintain the code base, you get a ticket and it's a bug fix in that legacy code base. Yeah, you write a tiny test for that specific bug, you prove the bug works, you prove the bug exists, and then you understand the scenario that makes the bug exist with a failing test.
Yeah.
And you make the test pass. And you make the code base a little better. Because maybe to test it, you had to kind of decouple a little bit some things, right? You need to use some dependency injection here and there, and boom, you can test it. You can reproduce the bug, then you fix the bug, the test pass. You leave it there. This regression never happen again. And you added one test. You're not going to test the whole thing. The things that are working, you don't touch.
Exactly.
Right? But the new things, the things that are maintaining, the bugs, if you need to add a new feature, yeah, you test the new feature. Does it need to integrate with an old feature? You test the integration of the old feature with the new feature, and etc. But you just don't go there and start writing tests for everything. No, as you go.
Exactly.
Otherwise, you're going to have to freeze, have the features freeze. Don't write any features because we are refactoring and we are testing the code base. But it works.
Yeah. No, very, very, very important. As you go, and if something works, don't touch it.
Especially if it's legacy. And you didn't write it.
Yeah. Just never do that.
Right. Now, should I test if the rest of the team doesn't test? Well, yes, they don't because they created a legacy code base with no tests.
Yeah.
Should you join this team and start writing tests? Well, if they are open to the idea, of course. I joined a bunch of teams, they build amazing products, they don't have tests, and they have a little pain because of that. They don't have the skills to do it.
Yes.
I join them, I help them build the tests. They're happy, they learn a new skill. They're open to it. Yes, of course you should. If you have the skills, you have the means, do your best every time. Do your best. But
exactly.
What if the team doesn't want it? They don't want it. They don't. You don't need it. We don't like tests. You should not write tests.
Yeah, that's...
it happens.
That's unfortunate. I mean, if everyone, is motivated not to do that, and you come and say, well, I'm motivated to do that, then you're going to have conflict, big time.
You can't win this fight.
No, exactly. So good luck to your next endeavor.
Right, so the answer is no. If your team doesn't want that, you're going to have conflict. And you cannot win against the collective, right?
No.
The team dictates. But if you want to, and if you think that's going to help you drive your career to find better opportunities in the long term and build more valuable skills, you should probably find a new team.
Yes, exactly. And that goes for all levels, by the way. If you're a junior and you're working somewhere that they don't do these practices, maybe you want like a more competitive environment, with better teachers.
Yes.
So that's a junior, mid-level. If you're a senior now,
even if you're going to make less money,
exactly, for
in the
sure,
long term, it's going to pay off.
Yes, it's a good investment. If you're going to find a team that does these things well, for sure, go for it. But even in the senior lead level, let's say you have a team and then you come in with a purpose of, I don't know, like changing the culture or improving the processes. And if no one else wants to do these things, that's going to be a nightmare.
Yes.
Because of incentives, like just people don't want to do these things. There's nothing wrong with don't want to do this. Like it's just, you're not on the same page. That's all. That's all. Everything that it says.
Yes.
So, yeah, that's why you need to filter, beforehand, before joining.
Filter better next time.
Yes.
Nice. Yes. Okay. So should I test if my manager or boss doesn't want me to test? I guess it's the same thing, right?
Yeah.
You cannot win this fight with your manager, if your boss, someone that's in a superior position with more authority.
Yes.
You cannot win that. You can win their trust. And with their trust, you can influence. And actually, if you can win trust in a team that is failing and help them build something better, you'll be in a very good position to progress your career there.
Or you can do what you did.
Yeah. Well, I don't recommend that, but...
Oh, yes, over-deliver by...
I'll take the risk on me. I would say if I don't deliver on time,
yes,
I'll work weekends, I work extra times, because I know I can deliver, because I built the skills and I trust it, that I can deliver on time even when I'm writing tests. But if you don't have the confidence, that's probably a bad idea, because you're going to have to work weekends.
Yes, exactly. So the question is, how much invested are you in this thing, and are you willing to over-deliver? Are you willing to, sacrifice your own personal time, I guess, and just work on something?
Risk, right? Some skin in the game.
Absolutely, yeah. You know what? Like, at some point, you're gonna have to have some skin in the game. So,
if you want a remarkable career,
exactly,
high stakes, high rewards.
Yeah. So you should better do it. Like the sooner, the better, I guess.
Okay, I think that's enough for today.
Okay.
How many questions we replied here?
Yeah,
20?
a lot.
A lot?
Maybe, yeah. Okay, so I guess this is going to do it for this first edition of the iOS Lead Essentials. Let us know what you think and send your questions in the comment section below. We'll see you again next time. Bye, y'all.
See ya.